in this culture. My next book, which I'm working on right now, will be entitled The Myth of Normal, Illness and Health in an Insane Culture. And in this culture, everybody gets traumatized because the essence of trauma, as far as I'm concerned, and Joanne did quote Peter Levine on this, trauma is not what happened to you, trauma is what happens inside you. And the thing that happens in trauma is you get disconnected from yourself. And it's that disconnection on the emotional and physiological level, on the gut level, that then has us floundering in life, wondering who the heck we are, what are we supposed to do, and pursuing phantoms and ghosts for any kind of temporary relief. And the essence of the psychedelic experience in the proper context and in the right way is actually to connect you to yourself. And it's in that regaining of that connection to yourself that the healing actually happens. Because as Joanne pointed out, we do all of that healing capacity within ourselves. Now, Western medicine knows everything about cure and nothing about healing. And that's the problem. So they can cure a lot of things. Like, it's amazing what Western medicine can do. I mean, it really is. It's not a question of throwing it out or being critical of it. But it's also important to understand what it doesn't understand and what it doesn't know. And this is where the psychedelics provide an interesting and often very useful way in. Now, let me quote you something else here. This is from another person that I worked with, in this case, not with ayahuasca, but with something, MDMA or something very close to MDMA. And after the experience, now this person who I'm referring to now is a man in his 30s who has experienced the most intense and really almost incredible but documented medical trauma of anybody I've ever met or heard of. He was literally traumatized at the hands of physicians over and over and over again, and was addicted to drugs, to opiates, at the hands of doctors by the age of 12. And so we did one session with her, him, and he writes me afterwards, "Dear Gabo, this has been an experience beyond words. I have been very deep in thought, but strangely in touch with my feelings." In other words, getting in touch with himself again. The amount of gratitude that I feel right now is immense, and I just wish I had the words to express it. I hope you know. We asked him during the session, "Who are you without your defenses?" He said, "There's the danger in the question. Who am I without my defenses? Words have always been one of my greatest defenses. It seems I'm more accustomed to explaining my feelings rather than just to express them. I don't know. I feel like my words have been falling short. I think there's an opening now that has been closed for a very long time, or maybe I've never had it before." So that's what one psychedelic session could do. I wish I could tell you that this person has done brilliantly since then, but he has not. And for the rest of my talk, I want to talk to you about, you've heard all the good news in this place. So this is not in any way meant to, and I will reinforce that in a while. But with this person that we worked with, I've just quoted him. 2 years later, subjectively he's worse than ever. Because we opened up something for him, showed him a real possibility, and gave him a terrific experience of connection and trust and love and self-awareness that we did not have a plan for integrating into his life and providing follow-up and background and support. So there was this tremendous opening of vulnerability that he hasn't had since infancy. And then it was kind of arrogant on our part and blind to think that, oh well, with our great therapeutic presence and insight and love and this powerfulness, we'll just go so deep that we'll just clear this person out completely. It takes time. It takes integration, support. It takes ongoing work. Now, the good news is we're starting again. And this time we're going to do it the right way. And this person is open to that. They've come to that position of trust again, where they're willing to go through that again. But I'm just telling you, it's an object lesson of how not to go about it. So first of all, the importance of a long-term plan, ongoing support, and structures to help integrate the insights and the experiences that occurred in the psychedelic experience. So that's one danger, that's one warning. Another is that we become too attached to the experiences themselves. I'm personally not that interested. It happens a lot. People come and they talk with excited tones about what did, and I've done, I've experienced a whole lot of psychedelics over the years. I understand the fascination and the excitement, but I'm somewhat jaded, or I shouldn't say jaded, just not interested in a conversation about what great experience I had and what did this do for you, what did that do for you, what are you going to do next? My answer is get a life next. If it's really helping you that much, don't talk so much about the experience, put it to your life. So that it can show up in a way that other people who haven't had your experience can actually see. Don't make that thing into itself. Now the Buddhist psychology of the mind points out that there's a powerful structure in our minds, which they call manas, which makes us attached to the idea of self. And believe me, even the most beautiful and spiritually revealing and deep experience can become an object of the ego because of the grasping nature of our minds. The grasping nature that, as Joanne pointed out, is very much reinforced by the whole culture that we live in. So it's entirely possible to become attached to the experiences and to the insights rather than to the transformational process that this is really designed to facilitate. That's the second warning. The third warning, and Jeremy Narby, who's written a wonderful book on ayahuasca called The Cosmic Serpent. And he had an article just a couple of weeks ago in the magazine Granta, which was called The Confessions of a White Vampire. And he talked about how he went to the Amazon himself, and he lived with native people there as an anthropologist to study them. But he didn't realize that they were studying him at the same time. And he said, the Piro people, he said, the ones, some of the Amazon people in Peru, you know what that word for white people is? Owners of objects. So to these people, we're anthropological subjects, owners of objects. And another shaman said, of the white people, their thought remains constantly attached to their merchandise. They make it relentlessly and always desire new goods. But they're probably not as intelligent as they think. I fear that this euphoria of merchandise will have no end, and it will entangle themselves with it to the point of chaos. That's how clearly we're seen by these people who come from these shamanic traditions. But the problem is, the attachment is not necessarily just to earthly goods or to merchandise, it can also be to spiritual experiences. We can accumulate them, and then our ego can be proud of them and attach them. We have to watch that one very, very carefully. Then there's the actual, what has been called cultural appropriation, where we take practices that were developed somewhere else by other people, and we think we can just take them over. And we go down there with our money when we go down there, but we have no relationship with the people that we're moving amongst. And we have no concern about the impact of our presence and our behavior on their current lives. And we might even bring back some of what they teach and claim it for ourselves. And allied with that, there's also this danger of, might be called the savior syndrome or psychedelic evangelism, where we think we found the answers to the problems of the world and we want to save everybody. We should drop that. Psychedelics are never going to save the world. I mean, if anything's going to, it's going to have to be a deep movement of healing within humanity, of which psychedelics, in their proper context, will be an interesting and important part, as they can be in the spiritual journey that many people undertake. But we should never be evangelical about it. We use them and we practice them when it's appropriate, and it's what we get from them, what we learn from them, and the transformation that we may experience from them, that we manifest in the world. If anything's going to be help saving things, it's going to be that, not our evangelism. So we need to watch that one. We need just to be watch our evangelical zeal sometimes. Now the final risk that I'll mention, Joanne talked about. In the psychedelic world, as in the spiritual world in general, a lot of people who come are very vulnerable, they're very hurt, that's why they come. And often they've been hurt not just by occurrences in their childhood, but also by further being re-traumatized by healthcare givers, either wittingly or unwittingly. Then they come to the psychedelic world seeking healing. And the psychedelics strip off their defenses, which is what they do. You sit there and you got no defenses. Well, when you sit there and you got no defenses, if anybody's got any exploitive tendencies, it's going to invite those exploitive tendencies to express themselves. And the people, the so-called healers, whether they're shamans or psychotherapists, who have not dealt with their own exploitive, aggressive, and needy tendencies, will inflict them on the people they're working with. And I can give you two recent examples in Canada. Somebody who, when did ayahuasca up here in North America, she was induced to go to Peru. It's the worst kind of abuse that happened to her. Now we have to support her healing. And when Michael Palmer talked at the Orpheum on Monday evening, one of the last things he said, and I'll have to talk to where he got that information from, but he said that there's a real risk of sexual abuse, particularly with MDMA. Particularly with MDMA, because it really opens the heart and makes you want contact. And it's happened already. And it's happened already closer to home than you might like to imagine. And I'll tell you, there's been conversation about it. There's been conversation about it. And I've had conversations with at least one person who's very active in psychedelic work in British Columbia, both as a therapist and in a public way, who's actually telling me, well, what about the patient's responsibility? She participated in it too. In other words, here's the therapist who still thinks that the patient is in any way to be blamed when the psychotherapist, under the influence of a psychedelic, forms a relationship with her that he can then exploit for sexual purposes. My own reaction is not to talk to that guy very much. Because anybody who doesn't get that with this powerful tool at our disposal, just as in any power relationship, this doesn't just happen in a psychedelic world, by the way, it happens in the spiritual world all the time. If you look at the head of the Shambhala organization, a big Buddhist organization, he had to resign recently because he was sexually exploiting women. It happens over and over and over and over and over again, but it also is happening, and it's going to happen in the psychedelic world. A very famous shaman from Peru who's been to Canada, and the students still teach up here, and some of the students have dealt with it and others have not. He would sexually exploit young women during ceremony. A very powerful shaman from Peru. His name is Guillermo Alvarez. And he used to come up here. Some of the students still see nothing wrong with what he did. And they're running ayahuasca ceremonies here in BC. You don't think his energy enters their work when they haven't dealt with it in themselves? Now, other of his students very painfully have dealt with it. And they recognize how it affected them, and they've done the work to purify themselves. Same in the Ibogaine world. A very famous Iboga shaman from Gabon. Same thing. And his students here in Canada better deal with it. Better deal with the fact that their teacher, for all his powerful healing capacities and the genuine healing that he has given to many people, is also used his powers to exploit young women. Because if they don't deal with it, that energy is going to affect and infect their work here in Canada. So I'm saying that all this has to be taken into account when we move into this work. And to end on a positive note, I'm tremendously inspired by the work that I've witnessed and been able to have the fortune to participate in over 12 years of psychedelic work now. I'm talking about ayahuasca, I'm talking about Ibogaine, Iboga, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, 5-MeO-DMT. Really is you'd have to say, in the present time, it's the most exciting development in the healing work that's available to us. Now, Trevor and I participated in a Iboga experience a little under a year ago. Some aspects of which him and I will never talk about in public. Will be, Trevor. Never. But his experience with the tree reminded me of something that happened to me in that journey. You know, he asked the tree a question. Well, the guy leading the Iboga ceremony, in the very depth of it, asked me, what is the meaning of life? And I understood when I was asked that question that it was being asked as a koan, it was being asked as a puzzle that you're not supposed to think about, because your thinking mind will never come up with an answer. But I'll tell you, an answer did come up for me, and it was life-affirming. And I would say, now that I'm talking about it and I'm in touch with it, it's also transformative. So he asked me 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, with this African music playing in the background. He said, what is the meaning of life? And I don't want to say what I answered, because I didn't answer. The I who usually thinks and sorts things out wasn't there. to come up with an answer. But the answer that did arise, the question was, what is it being alive?
These are not just presentations you're witnessing. This is an experiment in truth speaking. Thank you. So we have some time for some questions and answers. So if I could ask all of the speakers, and can I get one of those remote microphones back? The way it's going to work is I'm going to need it. So we're going to ask questions in two separate ways. One is through the Slido process, and we've had a chance to prioritize them, so I'll read some questions. We also have an opportunity to two separate ways of asking questions. One is through the Slido process that I announced at the beginning. And we'll start with that. But the other way is you can also do it the old school way, and a microphone will be passed to you if you put up your hand if you'd like to ask a question. So the first question through Slido is, can you describe certain guidelines to someone who are wanting to have a psychedelic experience alone?
Yeah.
Don't. The reason I said it is not because you can't. A lot of people have, and I've got benefit from it. I mean, you know, the woman I told you about with the scleroderma, she did it on her own. She had no other choice. But the reason I say don't in this context is because this is not what this organization is about, and this is not this work is about. This work is really all about careful choice of clients, appropriate setting, appropriate support. So this is not a setting in which I want to give guidelines on how people should work on with this kind of stuff on their own.
Yeah, I would just say that if you plan on doing that, I would take the harm reduction approach. And definitely focus on settings, making sure that you have a really good intention going into it, and a really good container, safe container. And also just being able to check in with someone afterwards, whether it's a therapist or a loved one or a friend, just so that you don't open yourself up to such a big experience and then have no support afterwards, because anything could get opened up. And integration is really, really important in this work.
Terence McKenna famously said the heroic dose was taking 5 or more grams of dried mushrooms in a dark room by yourself. That's cool. If you want to do that, that's cool. But if you do that exact same thing with a blindfold on, with headphones on, and maybe the Johns Hopkins psilocybin playlist, which is available on Spotify, with a sitter there, somebody that's sober and is going to be able to hold that space for you, you're going to be able to let go to a whole different degree. It's scary by yourself with that much medicine in you, but if you know you've got a loving assistant next to you, psilocybin is technically the safest substance on earth. So I say play with it, but do it with some support.
Would anybody like to put up their hand to ask a question with a microphone?
Joel's coming to you there.
That's a yes.
Thank you. Hi. I just have 3 questions, so I'm just going to put them all out at once. You talked about how psychedelics help you connect with yourself. What's the difference?
Stand up.
Sure. What's the difference between the way that psychedelics help you connect with yourself and the way that yoga does? And then secondly, if I suspect that I might have exploitative tendencies and I want to become a healer of some sort someday, how do I go about doing that work on myself? And my third question is, what are some examples of integration?
I can only really answer one of those questions that you answered, and it was about the yoga kind of plant medicine connection and what's the difference. I think it all has to do with that mind-body connection within your experience within the moment. So I just think they both approach it from a different perspective. And that's all I can say. That's one thing I learned from this stuff, is that it really addresses all contractions within the body. And I think that's what yoga is all about too, is about union of mind and body.
I'd say the truth is the truth, and whether you're going to try and access that truth through something like psychedelics or through something like yoga, we all end up at the same truth. With regards to the exploitative energies, you just need to keep working on it. There's different techniques. Like I really early on got into Taoist sexual energy cultivation techniques, Mantak Chia's books, to get to know your sexual energy. Don't be afraid to venture down that road and get to know it on your own. Like, learn about your androgynous side. There's so much digging you can do, and just be honest about it and dig into it, and know that you're playing with fire. I think that's the biggest thing with sexual energy. It's fire, and fire can be used to create something great, or it can burn the whole house down. So just be careful.
I'll speak to the integration piece. With integration, there's so many different ways of going about it. On the MAPS website, you can actually find integration therapists in the community. Many of them are wonderful, and I highly recommend doing it with a therapist, simply because there is the connection within the relationship, and the therapist may help guide you in some of the areas that you might be having some blind spots around, especially if they're psychedelic friendly. And so that might just look many different ways depending on the modality that the therapist uses, but it's really accessible. It's right there. You know, if you do anything like holotropic breath work, just with breath and evocative music, you could bring an altered state of consciousness. So it's right there, it's accessible. And it might look like parts work or shamanic journeying or anything like that, but if you are able to, you can access that very, very easily. You may just bring in your last vision and be able to work with that within that setting, and find ways to then integrate it into your day-to-day life, because a vision is just a vision. It's wonderful, but it simply is just a vision. It doesn't mean anything until you integrate it into your life, right? That's the real work, when you actually embody what you've seen, the wisdom that you've been given. And so I just find that in a therapeutic space, you have that container and that safety to be able to go down that route and really explore the subconscious, because it's really accessible. It's right there. When we quiet the mind, listen to the body, it's right there.
So quickly to the three questions. It's not one or the other. It's not what's the difference? Somebody who really connects, you would have to say there's no difference. And people have connected forever without psychedelics, really connected to the self with the capital S. And yoga is all about unity. That's what yoga means. On the other hand, it's very easy to go through the motions of yoga without doing much connecting, especially in the Western world, where yoga is often seen as kind of a physical workout. But as Joanne said in her original talk, that after a good psychic experience, yoga is one way to maintain the integration, because you stay connected to your body, conscious yoga. As to the point of what to do with these explorative energies, well, of course we have them within us. Especially as males, we have them with us. We do. That's not a problem. It's a problem to the degree that we don't recognize that they're within us, or a problem to which we allow them to govern our behavior and our attitude and our speech, and even our look, the way we look at people. So there's nothing wrong with recognizing that you have these parts. It's a question of you taking responsibility for them. And you'll know when you're ready and when you're not. But if there's any doubt in you, don't work with others. Keep working on yourself. A lot of people out there that haven't done that work. The third point about integration, to what Joanne said, I'll just add that it's very important that other than the specific integrational practices and discussions, is that you build a life that's based on what you've learned. So the environment in your life. Now, Trevor talked about an inherent difficulty of having a certain experience and going back into the same environment, which is going to evoke the same behaviors and trigger the same feelings. So the kind of environment that we put ourselves into, we have to put some thought into that. Now, and many of us have more choice than some other people who have less choice as to which environment they're going to live in. But within the environments that we live in, we have to make the choices to go back to what Trevor said, watering those plants within us that should flower and not watering the weeds. So we have to have an environment that supports that, and we have to build a structure in our lives that supports that. Structure has to do with what's my day going to look like, what I'm going to eat, and so on. So integration is specific practices, but it's also a question of environment and structure, architecture in your life.
I'd like to ask two more, or read out two more questions, and then move on. And the next one I'll just read, and then I'll thank Anne-Marie. As a respectful suggestion, as an Indigenous person from another territory, I feel it's important to thank the Musqueam people for letting us be here tonight. So I'd like to thank Anne-Marie for actually doing that. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And how will psilocybin be gradually moved into trials at MAPS as far as the phased trials is the question. I'd just like to acknowledge that there are other research groups on the planet. There's the HEFTA group and the COMPASS group, and both of those two other groups are working with psilocybin. At MAPS is more working with MDMA. We have ideas as to where to move, but that all takes money. But would anyone like to comment on the next one about the phased psilocybin? No? Okay. The last one is DMT therapy on the MAPS menu. Actually, it isn't right now. We have a lot of medicines we're interested in. DMT isn't one of them right now. Oh, is DMT, is DMT on the MAPS menu of ones that we're interested in right now?
What do they mean DMT? What form of DMT?
So the question is, do you mean ayahuasca, or do I interpreted the question to mean smokable DMT or injectable DMT, not ayahuasca? So the person who asked the question, can you give me a clue? Are you talking about ayahuasca or DMT?
Well, the thing about DMT is it's present in all these substances, or it triggers it in the brain. So that's I don't know. If you think of DMT, if you talk about 5-MeO DMT, for example, the toad medicine form of it, I don't think there's anybody. There's been a lot of work with it. There's even been a book written about it by, what's his name?
Martin Bell.
Sorry?
Martin Bell.
That could be one. I'm thinking of somebody else. But in any case, a lot of study. But I don't think there's any. I don't believe there's any formal studies of DMT. Is that what do you think?
Rick Strassman.
Rick Strassman, I'm thinking about. Yeah, doctor. He's a psychiatrist. He's worked with DMT quite a lot. If you're interested in that subject, read Strassman's book. But I don't know that there's an ongoing studies now right now.
I recently heard a podcast interview with Stan Groff, who's one of the originators of some of this Western use of psychedelic medicines, for sure. One of the things that he said that, if he had 50 more years to live, something he'd be very interested in studying would be the use of 5-MeO DMT in a therapeutic setting, because 5-MeO DMT is so short-lived, yet so profound, you could actually do something like that in a psychiatrist's office, was his opinion. So I think there's lots of room for study with those substances. Give us your money.
I would like to thank all of these amazingly fabulous two speakers. this is a fundraiser. You can contribute by with cash or finding a volunteer with one of those iPads and swiping your charge card through it. If you could help us raise money for psychedelic research, greatly appreciated. We also have a year's free float house raffle that's happening here. Anne-Marie, you got it. Somebody has as many floats as they want per year, and that person is going to be 2804 202. The final thing is, for those with a VIP ticket, we have a VIP mingle that's going to happen. So you can either find the room through one of the volunteers who will show you, or you go out this door behind us, turn right and walk down to find the big red doors on the left with the circle of chairs in it in about 45 steps that way. And the VIP folks are welcome to come and hang and chat. Thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciate the fact you're here. Thank you.